Hello YouTube, and welcome back to another book review from me, your host, Logan Albright. Today I'm talking about a book that I've been reading for a long time. It's taken me a long time to get through this book, but I finally finished it. It's the very thick The Priory of the Orange Tree by Samantha Shannon. I was attracted to this book by the cover. I like the blue and orange art a lot. I saw it in the store and thought that was interesting. And I'm attracted to it by the title because I am a sucker for like monasteries and religious orders. And I am also a sucker for citrus fruit, which I love. So I thought, ooh, Priory of the Orange Tree. That sounds interesting. I didn't know anything about it, but I thought I'd give it a shot. I just knew it was a fantasy novel, and it's being highly acclaimed. It's got a lot of people saying good things about it and comparing it to the great fantasy novels of history. And I thought, oh, I should read that and see if it's any good. So I did read it. And I would say, what's my verdict? On the whole, I enjoyed it. I have some criticisms of it, which I'm going to talk about. But on the whole, I thought it was a pretty good read and a pretty good story. And I admire the effort that goes in to writing an 800-page novel because it's not something that's easy to do. So good job, Samantha Shannon, there. The story is basically, it's got loads and loads of characters, tons of characters, and there's helpfully a kind of guide in the back that tells you who all the characters are and reminds you in case you get lost, because it's quite a complicated story, and it takes place at a number of locations, and there's lots and lots of characters, and you got to keep track of all of them. But the story is basically told from a number of perspectives. Some of the main characters are a young woman named Tane, who is a dragon, or aspiring to be a dragon rider, and working on that. She's very excited about that. There is an alchemist named Nicolas Roos, who is trying to discover the secret to immortal life. There's a palace guard of the monarchy named Aad, who is actually a mage who's been assigned to protect Queen Sabran, who's the queen of this land. And the monarchy is basically standing to hold back the sinister forces of the ancient dragons of the south, led by the Nameless One, who are threatening to come back, and they're spreading a kind of draconic plague among the population. And it's all the signs that this ancient evil is going to resurface. There's also good dragons. There's like the Tane, the dragon rider. They have dragons that they cooperate with and have kind of been semi-domesticated, I guess, although the dragons are not animals. They're sentient creatures. But there's also the evil ones that are threatening to come back. And that's sort of the thrust of the story, is how all these different stories interact and how they deal with the threat of the dragons. So that's basically what it's about. I don't really like dragons as creatures. It's not a thing that I've ever been into. All these fantasy books that center around dragons, it's not really my thing. And because I'm an idiot, when I saw the cover of the book, I didn't even notice that there was a giant blue dragon on the cover. For some reason, it didn't register in my mind. And so I was like, started reading it and I was like, oh, this is a dragon book. And I'm not that into it. But, I thought the story was pretty good. The prose has been criticized as bloated and purple by my friend Allison, who has read some Samantha Shannon. I don't really mind purple prose, first of all. Let me say that. I don't really get it as a criticism. Like, your problem is with descriptive, elaborate text with creative metaphors in it. That's something I look for in fiction. I like that kind of prose. And so I don't really have a problem with it. I didn't think the prose in this book was particularly purple either. Like, the paragraphs are quite short. You don't get any kind of like 2-page descriptions of what a dress looks like you do in The Wheel of Time, which I actually think this is quite similar to The Wheel of Time. It reminded me of The Wheel of Time a lot, with all the kind of political intrigue and the different plots that are going on. Made me think of that, but it doesn't have that kind of Robert Jordan, like overly descriptive language. It's a lot of it is dialogue. There was one line I criticized. I put in a short like months ago when I first started reading this, like dawn broke like a heron's egg. And I was like, what does the fact that it's a heron's egg have to do with it? I get that eggs break and that they're round like the sun and that the yolks are yellow like the sun, but like a heron's egg, like that's a stupid line. And so that annoyed me. But otherwise, I thought the prose was fine. And I thought the characters we get to the characters, but I thought the story was interesting. I thought the plot was fine. I thought the world building was overall pretty good. There's a couple maps in there. You can see what's going on. And the chapters are divided between east and west. So they go back and forth between the east part of the world and the west part of the world. And over time, this distinction starts to mean a little less as the characters travel and kind of meet up and the different storylines start to interlock. But I thought that was a cool way of dividing up everything. The other criticism that the text is bloated, I'm a little more sympathetic to, because the one problem I would say the story has is pacing. The reason it took me so long to get through this book is because the first part of it, maybe the first couple hundred pages, I found very slow. I found the setting up the world building and setting up all the characters and going to all the different threads took such a long time that when you get, it takes like 200 to 300 pages before you get into the action of the story. And I did feel that it really picked up once you get into the action of the story, and I started to get more excited about it in the kind of middle third of the book, or middle 2/3 of the book. But the first bit is a little bit of a chore to get through. And then the conclusion happens very quickly. Like everything wraps up in like the last 50 pages, which I found a little bit surprising, because like there's been all this build up for all this time, and then it felt like it's like, oh, everything's over now. So I think it could have been paced a little bit more balanced with like a little bit of setup. I don't mind some setup. I don't think like one of my common criticisms of book reviews and writing advice and things that other people say is this idea that like you have to grab people from the first sentence, and if they're not hooked right away, they're going to lose interest. I think that's stupid, and like all the greatest novels in history don't necessarily have amazing first pages, but like you know, you take your time to build your world and to let people in on what's going on, and you can build up slowly, and I think there's nothing wrong with that. But taking 300 pages to do it is pushing it a little bit for me anyway. So yeah, I thought the pacing could have used some work. But the other thing I would say, and this is a problem I have with all fantasy novels almost, because I just find trouble relating with the characters, and I think this is sort of a common flaw with the way fantasy is written, is that the characters always feel a little flat to me. I'm currently rereading the first Harry Potter book, which I haven't read in probably, I don't know, at least a decade, probably more than a decade, but I'm reading it in Welsh because I bought it in Welsh when I was over in the United Kingdom, and I'm studying that language. So I've been rereading it in a foreign language, which is a lot of fun, but I'm reminded of how like immediately you latch onto those characters and how likable they are, and how you know, invested you become in them emotionally right away. Harry, Ron, and Hermione, Hagrid, Dumbledore, you know, Snape, you love to hate. Like all these characters, you just immediately have emotions about. And I find in this book and in most of the modern fantasy that I read, the characters feel a little bit flat. And I think a lot of that has to do with the kind of the register of their speech. You know, there's this tendency to write fantasy dialogue in very formal, kind of oldie Englishy kind of sort way, where it's like, behold, the jewel of the 7 stars is rising in the east. And it's hard to kind of get emotionally invested in a character who talks like that, because they all sound the same, and they don't sound like real people. And I don't know, they don't sound like people that you want to be friends with, or that you were going to miss being around, or that you have strong emotions towards. So I found that there was a lot of that in here. And although there are many thousands of characters in this book, and lots of different narrators, and they all have their different drives and their goals and their things they're after, I just found it hard to really care about them or differentiate them and like have their personality traits. Like if you ask me the personality traits of any of the characters, I would struggle to tell you what they really are, because they all kind of talk that same way, and they all just seem kind of like noble and proud and flat and uninteresting. So that's a problem I had with the book. But like I said, it's not unique to this book. I've had this with all fantasy books that I've read apart from Tolkien. This book has been compared to the Game of Thrones and to Tolkien. I haven't read Game of Thrones, so I can't comment on it. I resent anything being compared to Tolkien because I love him so much. But I wouldn't compare it to that. I would compare it to The Wheel of Time, which seems like it has a lot of similarities to me. I also compare it to, I've only read one Brandon Sanderson book. I read Elantris, but it reminded me a bit of Elantris. It has a similar feel to that. And so, you know, if you're a fan of those type of fantasy novels, you might enjoy this one too. And if you're a fan of long books, you might enjoy it because it is 800 pages. That's another reason I haven't really delved into a lot of modern fantasy, is everything seems to be in like a 12-book series, and every book is 600 pages long. And I'm like, just give me one standalone novel. That's all I want. And I'm not even sure that this is a standalone novel. I saw on Goodreads when I went to rate it, it said like #1 in the series. Like, how is there possibly more? It's already so long. So I just want a standalone novel. Leave me alone, guys. So I've said a lot of negative things, which I didn't really intend to do, because I did, on the whole, enjoy the book, and I'm glad I read it. But I'm just thinking of things to comment about it and things that I had problems with, because when you're discussing a work and you're critiquing a work, sometimes the things that you didn't like stand out a little bit more than the things you did like. It's easy to just say, yeah, it was good, I enjoyed it, but that's not a very detailed criticism or very interesting. So I kind of pick apart the things that particularly stood out to me as difficult or unenjoyable. A lot of people are praising this book because of representation. It's like got many female characters who are the main leads, and it's got some non-heterosexual love stories in it. All fine with me. I don't care either way, but I always think it's strange that people like have that as a reason to like something, or as a reason to dislike something for that matter. It's like, I don't care what gender the characters are. I don't care what gender their significant others are. I care if the story's good. I care if the characters are interesting. I care if the author is sucking me into the world that they've created. And the fact that people cite that as a reason to like or dislike something is a little bit strange to me. I don't really get that. I don't know that I will dip back into the Samantha Shannon well. I know she's written other books, but I thought this one looked cool, and I was curious about it, and so I gave it a try. And although it took up several months of my life getting through it, I'm glad I read it, and now I know more about modern fantasy, and I know more about her writing. So if you are a fan of modern fantasy, you might just enjoy this book. You might want to check it out. If you're not, then by all means, don't check it out. But I will be back again next week with another book review that will not be a fantasy book. It's going to be something very different. So stick around for that, and we'll see how that goes. In the meantime, if you have read this book, I'd love to know your thoughts on it. Leave me comments down below in the comments section, and I will read them and respond to them. If you enjoyed this review, please like the video and subscribe to the channel and click the bell for notifications, and come back every Wednesday for more book reviews from me, your host, Logan Albright. Until then, thank you so much for watching. I've been your host, Logan Albright. I will catch you next time. Later.